Hi there. Today I'd like to speak about hypothesis testing, and basically we're talking about our session statistics level 2. And so we refer to what we call a statistical hypothesis. And basically what is that? A statistical hypothesis is an assumption about a parameter. Interestingly speaking, we talk about the parameter, which is basically a mean. All right, so a statistical parameter is basically the parameter is normally the mean of the population. The mean of the population, or actually the binomial, or actually the binomial proportion of the population. So what do we basically do when it comes to hypothesis testing? So when it comes to hypothesis, the word itself, hypothesis testing. So we're going to test hypothesis, all right? Hypothesis testing. And when we do the test, basically, let us start this way. You could be at a hospital and you're observing that the number of calls arriving at the reception is, let's say, according to your observation, is 60 calls per minute, all right? And then somebody else tells you that your observation, 60 calls per minute arriving at that reception, is not true, all right? So he's kind of challenging you. He's saying that maybe it's more, and somebody else is saying maybe it's less, all right? So what do we have here? Originally, we have you. You basically assume that the number of calls arriving was 60 calls per minute. Now, let us say X, all right, is coming and challenging you, saying there's more calls, more than 60 calls per minute. So what we have then is a situation like this. You have a null hypothesis. According to you, the null hypothesis, which is basically denoted by HO, is such that the number of calls per minute, that is the mean mu, is 60. And then you have also an alternative hypothesis. And this is where it gets very interesting. And that's where the whole idea of carrying out a test comes about, which is basically H1. And that is now to say that now somebody else, Mr. X, might believe it's greater than 60. Or maybe it's less than 60. So this is what hypothesis testing is all about. You are saying that this is the number of calls per minute in this particular example, and then somebody else is saying it's either more or it's either less. You will be given sufficient data to be able to carry out your test. And when you carry out your test, you're going to be testing at a certain significance level of significance. You could be carrying out a test. They might tell you, for example, carry out a test of, let's say, 5% level of significance. And this is actually going to be really understood when we pick up an examples, all right? So before we take the example, I would like to talk about the test itself. Now, we may be having what we call a one-tail test. One-tail test. Now, what does one-tail test basically refer to? You will have your normal distribution curve like this, and you have one like this. So, in a one-tail test, let's say, for example, it's greater than 60, all right? So, you're basically saying that this is greater here, greater than a certain amount, all right? So, we refer to this, the right-hand side, okay, of the normal distribution curve is greater than a certain amount here. Okay, your mean may be something else, all right? And maybe you carry out a standardized test and you get some kind of Z value here. So if you're referring to a test which is greater, you're more or less likely to be looking at a diagram like this. This is a one-tail situation, one-tail test. In a one-tail test, okay, if it's less than 60, then you're going to be referring, okay, to the left-hand side of your diagram. So this is a one-tail test. And before we go into any further, all right, you may also have, you may also be interested to know that the region here is your alternative hypothesis, and this one is basically your null hypothesis. So this is your null hypothesis, and that's your alternative hypothesis. Very interestingly speaking. Now this is a one-tail test. When we look at a two-tail test, okay, your diagram may be looking something like this. Sorry about that. So, and the region is actually your critical region. So if any of your test statistic value falls into that region, whatever the case may be here, all right, let's say this is A and this is B, right? You may also have an alternative hypothesis where, let's say, for example, an alternative hypothesis where the mean mu is not equal to 60. And there we refer to a two-tailed test. So this is now a two-tailed test. All right, so this is now is going to be your HO, and whatever is in this region here is H1. Okay, so anything outside the unshaded region is going to be the H1. And this is what we understand when it comes to introduction of a statistical hypothesis testing. All right, take care.